In the middle of the Millionaire's party, the nanny heard cries coming from inside the wall. Upon touching the spot, she discovered a living child, the millionaire's son, hidden among the bricks. The stepmother appeared, smiling, but her voice concealed a veiled threat. Without proof but full of courage, the nanny interrupted the party and exposed the truth before everyone. And what the millionaire did is shocking. The afternoon sun gilded the details of the imposing mansion in the most exclusive gated community in the Hamptons. The immaculate gardens were receiving the final touches for the party that would take place that night. The 50th birthday of Richard Sterling, a businessman known for his powerful connections and a fortune built in real estate development. Rose had just finished tidying the room of Leo, Richard's 10-year-old son. The nanny, at 45 with 20 of those years dedicated to that family, knew every corner of the mansion, every habit of its residents, every silent secret the walls kept. She was a simple woman with calloused hands and a watchful eye who had been there for Leo's entire life since his birth. "Rose, have you seen my sketchbook?" asked Leo, entering the room. The boy with almond-shaped eyes and dark hair carried the gentleness of his mother, who had passed away 3 years ago. "It's in the second drawer of your desk, where you always keep it," Rose answered with the familiarity of someone who knew the small details of the boy's life. Leo ran to the drawer, grabbed the sketchbook, and sat on the edge of the bed. Rose noticed his worried expression. "Is something wrong, my little one?" The boy hesitated, distractedly scribbling on a blank page. "Helena said I'm not supposed to come down to the party tonight," he mumbled without looking up. "She said it's a party for grown-ups, that I'll just be in the way." Rose felt a tightness in her chest. Helena, Richard's new wife, had entered that house like a perfumed whirlwind less than a year ago. At 32, with her studied beauty and strategic smiles, she had won over the widower in a matter of months. To the outside world, she was the devoted stepmother, the perfect wife, the exemplary socialite. But Rose, in the silence of her position, observed what others did not see. "Does your father know about this?" "Dad said I could stay until 9, Leo replied, his voice dropping to a whisper. "But Helena told me later that he changed his mind." Rose straightened the bedsheet, giving herself a moment for her irritation to dissipate before she answered. "I'll check on that with your father later, all right? I'm sure he wants you around on his birthday." The truth was, Rose had noticed the growing distance between father and son since Helena's arrival. Richard, once a present father despite his busy schedule, now seemed constantly distracted, as if he existed in a parallel reality created by Helena, a reality where Leo occupied less and less space. "Rose." Helena's melodious voice echoed down the hall before she appeared at the door, a perfectly painted smile framing her face. "I need you to help with the flower arrangements in the main hall. The florists have just arrived." Her gaze landed on Leo sitting on the bed with his sketchbook. "And you, darling, shouldn't you be with your piano teacher now? Remember we agreed you would play something for your father before you go to bed." Helena's smile didn't reach her eyes, which remained calculating, assessing every reaction. Rose noticed the slight tremor in Leo's shoulders, the way he flinched almost imperceptibly. "I'm going now." "Helena," the boy answered, closing his sketchbook. Helena approached, stroking Leo's hair with fingers tipped with perfectly manicured nails. "Good. You know how disappointed your father gets when you don't keep your commitments, don't you?" Rose swallowed hard. That was Helena's specialty. The veiled threat, the subtle manipulation, the pressure applied to the most vulnerable points. "Come on." "Rose," Helena continued, her expensive perfume leaving a trail in the air. "The guests will start arriving in a few hours, and there's still so much to do." As she followed Helena through the luxurious corridors of the mansion, Rose watched her studied walk, her always elegant posture, the way every movement seemed rehearsed for an invisible audience. In that kingdom of marble and crystal, Helena reigned like an ice queen, wrapping Richard in her web with surgical precision. In the main hall, florists were working on the extravagant decor Helena had ordered. Opulent arrangements of rare orchids and white roses transformed the space into a modern fairy tale setting. The guest list included influential politicians, powerful business leaders, and celebrities, all carefully selected by Helena to solidify her position in high society. "I want those flowers higher," Helena ordered one of the florists, pointing to the central arrangement. It must be visible from every point in the hall. Rose helped silently, arranging the tables according to the instructions she'd received. From a distance, she watched Richard enter the hall, engrossed in a phone call. When Helena saw him, her face transformed instantly, adopting an expression of adoration and sweetness that Rose knew was just another of her masks. "Darling, finally!" Helena exclaimed, approaching Richard and kissing him on the cheek. "I was just thinking of you. What do you think of the arrangements?" Richard looked around, clearly not very interested in the decor. "It looks great, as always," he replied distractedly. "Where's Leo? I promised we'd review his piano performance before the party." A flash of irritation crossed Helena's eyes so quickly it would have been imperceptible to anyone not watching closely. Rose, however, didn't miss the detail. "He's at his piano lesson, dear. Remember, you insisted he not miss any lessons?" Helena replied, her voice honeyed. "Besides, I was thinking, don't you think Leo will be bored at the party? It's all adults, conversations he won't understand. Perhaps it would be better if he stayed in his room after playing for you." Richard hesitated, and Rose knew that hesitation. It was the moment he would give in, as he had been giving in more and more frequently to Helena's suggestions. "Maybe you're right," he finally agreed. "He can stay until 8. Play a song for me, and then you can ask Rose to stay with him in his room." Rose felt a pang of disappointment. The Richard she had known for so many years would never have allowed his son to be excluded from an important moment like this. The man who had promised his dying wife that he would always put his son first was gradually disappearing under Helena's influence. The afternoon wore on, and the mansion buzzed with final preparations. Uniformed staff moved about discreetly, adjusting details under Helena's critical gaze. In the kitchen, renowned chefs prepared sophisticated delicacies. Outside, security guards reinforced the perimeter to receive the illustrious guests. Amidst all the movement, Rose found a moment to check on Leo. The boy was in the music room, seated at the piano, his fingers gliding hesitantly over the keys. When he saw her, he gave a small smile. "I'm going to play Mom's favorite song," he said, "for Dad's birthday." Rose approached, gently placing a hand on the boy's shoulder. "He's going to love it, I'm sure." At that moment, Rose couldn't imagine that in just a few hours, the perfect facade of this wealthy family would begin to reveal its deepest cracks, nor that she would be the only person capable of preventing silence from forever swallowing what little truth remained in that house of appearances. The first guests began to arrive punctually at 8 o'clock. Limousines and luxury cars formed an elegant line at the entrance to the Sterling mansion. Rose watched discreetly from the service corridor as women in designer dresses and men in impeccable suits were greeted by Richard and Helena, who formed the perfect couple under the strategically placed lights of the entrance hall. Helena was resplendent in a red dress that accentuated her curves without sacrificing elegance. Her arm was linked with Richard's with a possessiveness disguised as affection. From time to time, she would whisper something in her husband's ear, making him smile, a smile that Rose noticed never quite reached his eyes. Leo had already given his brief performance on the piano. He played his late mother's favorite piece with a surprising depth of emotion for someone so young. When he finished, there was a moment of silence in which Rose saw Richard's eyes well up. Helena quickly approached, breaking the connection between father and son. "Wonderful, darling. Now how about you go upstairs with Rose? You have school early tomorrow, and the adults will be up late talking about boring things," she said, smiling as she discreetly nudged him in the nanny's direction. Before Richard could protest, an important senator approached to greet him, and Helena skillfully steered her husband away from his son. Leo glanced at his father one last time before following Rose up the stairs. "You played beautifully," Rose commented as they ascended. "For your father was moved." "He didn't even get to talk to me," Leo replied, disappointment evident in his voice. "Helena always does that. She doesn't like it when we're together." Rose wanted to contradict the boy, to say he was imagining things, but she couldn't. Leo's sharp perception matched her own observations exactly. Instead, she gave his shoulder a gentle squeeze. "Your father loves you very much, Leo. Sometimes adults get distracted by other things." When they reached his room, Leo asked to draw for a little while before bed. Rose agreed, setting up the desk for him. While the boy drew, She quietly put away the clothes he had scattered. Earlier, "What are you drawing?" she asked after a few minutes of silence. Leo hesitated before turning the sketchbook to show her. It was a dark drawing for a child, a female figure with long dark hair and an exaggerated, almost grotesque smile was holding hands with a male figure. Off to the side, a small silhouette watched the scene. "It's Helena, Dad. And me," Leo explained with a naturalness that contrasted with the unease the drawing provoked. "Why are you so far away from them in the drawing?" Rose asked gently. "Because that's how it is in real life," he answered, returning to his scribbling. "Helena wants to be alone with Dad. She said that when I'm not here anymore, she'll finally be happy." An alarm went off in Rose's mind. "When you're not here anymore?" What did she mean by that, Leo? The boy shrugged as if commenting on the weather. "She says that when Dad isn't listening, that I'm just like Mom, that I remind him of Mom and that it bothers her." He paused, adding more dark details to the drawing. "Yesterday, she told Dad it would be better if I went to a boarding school in Europe." Rose felt a chill run down her spine. There was something predatory in the way Helena systematically isolated the boy, something too calculated to be just the jealousy of an insecure stepmother. "Leo, has Helena ever hurt you?" "Not with her hands," the boy replied after a moment of thought. "But she gets different when we're alone. She smiles differently. She looks different." He lifted his eyes from the drawing, meeting Rose's. "I'm scared of her, Rose." Those words, spoken with the sincerity only a child possesses, confirmed the suspicions Rose had been harboring for months. Helena wasn't just a vain woman who had captured a wealthy widower. There was something darker beneath the polished surface. "You don't have to be afraid while I'm here," Rose assured him, sitting beside the boy. "I promise I'll take care of you." After putting away the sketchbook, Leo asked Rose to read him a story before bed, a ritual they had kept since he was very small. She chose an adventure book she knew was one of his favorites, but she noticed he seemed restless, frequently glancing at the door. "Is something wrong?" she asked, interrupting the story. "Can you lock the door?" Leo asked, his voice almost a whisper. "Helena sometimes comes into my room at night, when she thinks I'm asleep. She just stands there and watches me. It's weird." Rose nodded, getting up to lock the door. The boy's request intensified her concern. What kind of woman snuck into her stepson's room just to watch him sleep? When Leo finally fell asleep, Rose remained by his side for a few more minutes, watching the boy's peaceful breathing. She promised herself she would be more vigilant. There was something very wrong in this house, something that went beyond Helena's daily petty cruelties. She decided to go downstairs to check on the party and to speak with Richard, if possible. As she descended the service stairs, she heard voices coming from one of the studies. The door was ajar, allowing fragments of the conversation to escape into the hallway. "We can't go on like this," Helena was saying, her voice stripped of the melodious tone she used in public. "As long as he's here, I'll never be anything more than a replacement." "He's my son," Richard replied, sounding exhausted. "What do you expect me to do?" "We've discussed this," Helena continued. "The boarding school in Switzerland is perfect. First-class education, a healthy environment far from this constant mourning you maintain in this house. He needs a fresh start, Richard. We need one. I can't just send him to another country." "Yes, you can, and you know it. You work all the time. You barely see him during the week. What difference would it make? And we could visit him on holidays." Rose moved closer to the door, trying to hear better. "The difference is that he would be alone, Helena. After everything he's already been through, he wouldn't be alone, he'd be at a school. And what about us? When do we get our chance to be a real family? There will always be her ghost between us as long as he's here, reminding everyone every minute of who came before me." There was a long silence, and then Richard's tired voice. "I'll think of something, all right? We have guests waiting now." Rose quickly drew back as she heard footsteps approaching the door. She hid in one of the service closets, her heart pounding. Through a small crack, she saw Helena exit first, followed by Richard seconds later. Her face had resumed the mask of the devoted wife, but her eyes remained cold, calculating. When the couple moved away toward the main hall, Rose emerged from her hiding place, her mind processing what she had just heard. Helena was determined to get rid of Leo, and Richard seemed increasingly weakened in his attempts to protect his son. Back in the hall, the party was in full swing. An orchestra played classical music, while waiters circulated with glasses of champagne and elaborate canapes. Rose kept to the shadows, watching Helena move among the guests like a social butterfly, her crystalline laugh occasionally echoing above the murmur of conversations. "How long have you worked for the Sterlings?" The voice startled Rose. Turning, she found a middle-aged man in an elegant suit, looking at her with gentle curiosity. 20 years, she replied, uncomfortable with the attention. "Mark Linden," he introduced himself, extending his hand. "I've been Richard's lawyer for almost as long as you've been here." Rose shook his hand briefly. "Rose," she replied simply. "You must have seen a lot in this house," Mark continued, his perceptive gaze analyzing her. "It's my job to see, not to comment," Rose answered diplomatically. Mark smiled, as if appreciating her discretion, a rare quality these days. He took a sip of his drink before continuing. "How is Leo handling all the changes?" The cautious question surprised Rose. There seemed to be genuine concern in the lawyer's voice. "He misses his father," she replied, choosing her words carefully. "Things have been different since Mrs. Sterling arrived." Mark nodded thoughtfully. "Richard has changed. Everyone notices, but no one says anything. It's as if Helena has—" He paused, as if reconsidering what he was about to say. "Well, it doesn't matter. I was just worried about the boy. He reminds me so much of his mother." At that moment, Rose realized there might be an unexpected ally in this sea of smiling strangers. Someone who also watched, someone who also cared. "Mr. Linden, do you think—" But Rose couldn't finish her question. A loud crash followed by screams interrupted the music and conversations. All eyes turned to the entrance of the hall where Helena stood, her eyes wide in a theatrical expression of panic. "Richard! Richard!" she called, her voice trembling. "It's Leo. He's gone. His bed is empty." Genuine panic hit Rose like a cold wave. She had left the boy sleeping safely less than 20 minutes ago, with the door locked. How could he have disappeared? Richard ran to Helena, followed by several guests. Rose hurried forward as well, her heart racing. As she passed Helena, she caught something in her eyes that made her pause for an instant. There was no panic there, only a calculating, almost satisfied gleam. And then Rose knew, with a certainty that chilled her blood, that Helena had something to do with Leo's disappearance. This was not an accident or a coincidence. It was the beginning of something that had been meticulously planned. Chaos quickly descended upon the Sterling mansion. The elegant party transformed into a makeshift search operation, with guests abandoning their champagne glasses to help look for the missing boy. Richard, his face pale and his hands trembling, coordinated groups to check every corner of the property. Rose ran immediately to Leo's room, her heart hammering in her chest. The door she had locked was now unlocked, the bed empty just as Helena had announced. The boy's pajamas were tossed on the floor, and the slightly open window allowed the night wind to gently sway the curtains. "It doesn't make sense," she muttered to herself, checking under the bed and inside the closet. He was fast asleep. "Perhaps he went exploring while everyone was distracted by the party," suggested Helena, standing at the door. Her tone was one of concern, but her eyes did not convey the same feeling. "Children are unpredictable." Rose turned to face her, studying the woman's perfectly made-up face. "The door was locked when I left," Rose replied firmly. "And Leo wouldn't wake up and wander off alone in the middle of the night. He's afraid of the dark." A fleeting, cold smile crossed Helena's lips before she reassumed her expression of anguish. "Are you implying something, Rose? At this critical moment, when we should be joining forces?" Before Rose could answer, Richard appeared in the hallway, accompanied by 2 security guards. "Any sign of him?" he asked, his voice thick with worry. Helena immediately ran into her husband's arms, transforming into a fragile wife. "Nothing yet, darling." "I'm so worried." Why would he do this? Could he have been upset about not being part of the party anymore? Rose watched the flawless performance, noticing how Helena deftly redirected any potential blame away from herself, subtly implying that Richard himself might be responsible for his son's disappearance by excluding him from the celebration. "I'll check the back of the property," said one of the guards. "Maybe he went outside to see the stars. The boy mentioned earlier there was a meteor shower tonight. I would never let him go out alone at night," Rose protested, but her voice was drowned out by the growing commotion. As the guards moved away, Helena rested her head on Richard's shoulder, sobbing quietly. What if he ran away? What if someone took him? The gates were open for the guests. Rose saw the strategy, plant multiple alarming possibilities to distract Richard from the truth. And it was working. The businessman seemed completely lost, alternating between despair and guilt. "I'll check the rest of the house," Rose announced, determined to find Leo far from Helena's manipulative gaze. Over the next 2 hours, the mansion was turned upside down. The closest guests remained, helping with the search while the others discreetly departed. The police arrived and began questioning staff and guests. The initial suspicion was a possible runaway or, in the worst-case scenario, a kidnapping, given the family's wealth. Rose, however, held a different theory. Something about Helena's reaction. The perfect timing of the disappearance, just when the party was at its peak and she could make a dramatic announcement, didn't seem like a coincidence. While the police worked, Rose decided to recheck the less frequented corridors of the mansion. The house was old, despite luxurious renovations, and had passages and areas that were rarely used. Leo knew many of them, as they used to play hide-and-seek on rainy afternoons. It was in the west wing, a remote area connecting the main wing to the old library, that Rose heard something. She stopped, holding her breath, and strained her ears. In the near-absolute silence, she distinguished a faint sound, something like a distant scratching, or perhaps a very weak moan. She followed the sound, which seemed to be coming from behind a large, imposing painting, a portrait of Richard's late wife, Leo's mother. The portrait had been moved to this little-used corridor at Helena's request, who had argued that looking at the past every day wouldn't help anyone move on. Rose approached the painting, placing her ear against the adjacent wall. The sound was clearer here, a soft, rhythmic scratching, as if someone were trying to get attention without making too much noise. "Leo?" she whispered, tapping lightly on the wall. "Leo, are you in there?" The scratching stopped for a moment, followed by a muffled sound that could have been a response. Rose felt her heart race. There was something or someone behind that wall. Carefully examining the painting and the surrounding area, Rose noticed something strange, an almost imperceptible line in the wall forming a rectangle. She pressed different spots until she heard a soft click. A section of the wall, a camouflage door, gave way by a few inches. Rose carefully pulled the opening wider, revealing a dark, confined space, a secret compartment between the walls of the old mansion, likely an old service passage sealed during renovations. And there, huddled in the corner, was Leo. His wide eyes reflected fear and relief upon recognizing Rose. "Rose," he whispered, his voice hoarse. She said it was a game. Rose knelt, extending her arms to the boy, who immediately threw himself into her embrace. He was trembling, and Rose could feel the dampness of tears on his shirt. "Who, Leo?" "Who said it was a game?" "Helena," the boy answered between stifled sobs. "She came into my room and said she had a surprise, a secret place to show me. She said it was a special hiding spot that no one knew about, and that we could play a trick on Dad." Rose felt a mixture of rage and confirmation of her suspicions. "Why didn't you call for help?" she asked gently, pulling back to examine the boy's pale face. "She said it was part of the game to stay quiet. That Dad would come look for me and it would be a big surprise." Leo paused, swallowing hard. But then she locked the hidden door and left. "I was scared to yell. What if no one heard me?" The calculated cruelty of the act made Rose shudder. Helena had deliberately locked a child in a dark, confined space, knowing Leo's fear of the dark. "We're getting you out of here right now," Rose said, helping the boy out of the compartment. "Your father has been looking all over for you." Before they could move away, the sound of heels on the marble floor made Rose stop. Helena appeared in the corridor, her red dress contrasting with the paleness of her skin. For a moment, upon seeing Leo out of his hiding place, an expression of fury crossed her face, quickly replaced by a radiant smile. "Leo!" "Thank God," she exclaimed, rushing toward them. "We were all so worried." "Where were you hiding, darling?" Rose placed herself protectively in front of the boy, who clung to her legs. "I think you know exactly where he was, Helena," Rose said, her tone calm but firm. "Since you're the one who put him there." Helena's smile faltered for a fraction of a second, before widening even further, now with a note of condescension. "What are you talking about?" I was in the hall with Richard and the police. She addressed Leo in a melodious voice. Darling, you gave us a terrible scare. Why did you hide like that? Leo shrank further behind Rose. You know why, he mumbled, almost inaudible. You said it was a game. Helena laughed, a crystalline and perfectly modulated sound. What an imagination! You must have been dreaming, darling. I would never play such a dangerous game. She turned to Rose, her gaze hardening while she maintained her smile. Rose, you seem exhausted. This whole situation has been stressful for all of us. Why don't you get some rest? I'll take Leo to Richard. No, Leo exclaimed, gripping Rose's skirt even tighter. I want to stay with Rose. Helena's expression froze for an instant before she took a step forward, extending a hand to Leo with false sweetness. Come now, darling. Don't be stubborn. Your father is very worried. Rose stood her ground. We'll all go find Richard together, she suggested, holding Helena's gaze. I'm sure he'll be relieved to know Leo is safe and sound. The two women stared at each other for long seconds, a silent battle of wills, with the frightened child between them. Finally, Helena took a step back, her smile now as cold as ice. Of course, let's all go, she agreed with false lightness. But Rose, there are things that are not for your eyes. You're tired? Perhaps you're confused. The veiled threat in her sweet words did not go unnoticed. Rose understood what Helena was implying. If she spoke about the hiding place, about what Leo had told her, her word would be questioned. After all, who would believe a servant over the elegant and socially respected wife of Richard Sterling? I'm not confused, Helena, Rose replied calmly. And I'm sure Leo isn't either. Helena narrowed her eyes, all pretense of cordiality momentarily forgotten. Be careful. Rose, 20 years of loyalty can be forgotten in an instant when it comes to serious accusations. Her voice dropped to an icy whisper. Think carefully about what you're going to say. A distraught nanny making accusations without proof. Who would be believed? Who would be fired? The group was interrupted by the sound of approaching voices. Helena immediately recomposed her expression of maternal concern, and when Richard appeared in the corridor, accompanied by 2 police officers, she rushed to hug Leo with exaggerated emotion. Richard! Rose found our boy. Thank God he's all right. Richard knelt, hugging his son tightly. Leo, where were you? We were so worried. Before the boy could answer, Helena intervened. He must have gotten scared by all the commotion of the party and hidden, right, darling? Children sometimes do impulsive things. Rose watched how Helena subtly directed the narrative, giving Leo no space to tell his version. The boy looked at Rose, his eyes pleading for guidance. Leo has something to say. Richard, Rose said, ignoring Helena's warning glare. Richard looked at his son expectantly, but Helena quickly placed a hand on the boy's shoulder, squeezing lightly. He's exhausted, poor thing. There will be plenty of time for explanations tomorrow. Right now he needs a warm bath and a good night's sleep, don't you think? Leo looked from Helena to his father, then to Rose. His small face showed the internal conflict, the truth he wanted to tell, and the fear of what would happen if he did. He began, but feeling the grip of Helena's fingers on his shoulder, he hesitated. I was hiding, he finally concluded, lowering his eyes. Rose realized that tonight's battle was lost. Helena had once again managed to control the situation, but the war was just beginning, and Rose would not let Leo face his stepmother's calculated manipulation alone. As Helena led Richard and Leo back to the main hall, she cast one last look at Rose, a look of triumph mixed with a warning. At that moment, Rose understood that her position in the Sterling house, her livelihood and her reputation were in jeopardy. But she also understood something more important. She was the only protection Leo had against Helena's growing toxic influence on his family. The morning after the party, a heavy silence hung over the Sterling mansion. The staff moved like shadows through the corridors, clearing away the last traces of the interrupted celebration. The incident with Leo had been officially classified as a scare, a boy who had decided to hide during his father's party. Case closed for the outside world, but not for Rose. She had spent the night on vigil, sitting in a chair beside Leo's bed. The boy had slept restlessly, waking up several times from nightmares. In one of those moments, he had grabbed Rose's hand with surprising strength. "Don't let her take me again," he had whispered, his eyes wide in the darkness. I won't, Rose had promised, stroking his hair until he fell back asleep. Now, while Leo had breakfast in the kitchen, under the supervision of the cook, Olivia, Rose took the opportunity to better examine the corridor where she had found the boy. In the daylight, the secret passage was almost imperceptible, a work of meticulous engineering that could only have been planned by someone who knew the house's structure well. Looking for something, Rose? Mark Linden's voice startled her. The family lawyer seemed to have appeared out of nowhere, impeccable in his suit even at this hour of the morning. "Mr. Linden," Rose greeted, trying to hide her surprise. "I didn't expect to see you here today. Richard asked me to resolve a few matters after yesterday's incident." He approached, looking at the wall Rose had been examining. An interesting area to be exploring. There was something in his tone that made Rose suspect Mark knew more than he was letting on. "You know this house well," she commented, not as a question but as a statement. Mark nodded, running his hand over the wall's surface where the hidden mechanism was. "I've known it since before Richard bought it. In fact, I was the one who recommended it to him when Fiona was still alive." A faint, nostalgic smile touched his lips. She loved the historical details, the secret passages, said it gave the place an air of mystery that matched her romantic soul. "So you know about the passages," Rose concluded, watching him intently. "Some of them. The house belonged to a Gilded Age tycoon who had a certain paranoia about security. He built several escape routes and hiding places." He pointed to the portrait of Richard's late wife. "This corridor, for example, has at least 2 hidden entrances that I know of." Rose pondered for a moment whether she should entrust her suspicions to Mark. He seemed genuinely concerned about Leo, and his long history with the family could make him a valuable ally. "Mr. Linden," she began cautiously, "what happened yesterday wasn't a simple case of a child hiding." Mark studied her with his perceptive eyes. "I suspected as much when I saw the boy's reaction. He didn't look like someone who had played a prank, but someone who was genuinely terrified." "Helena locked him in that passage," Rose said quietly, checking to see if anyone was nearby. "Leo told me. She said it was a game, led him there and locked him in." Mark's expression hardened, but he didn't seem surprised. "Are you sure about this?" Absolutely. I found him trembling with fear. And when I confronted Helena, she threatened me, in a veiled way. But it was a clear threat." Mark took a deep breath. "Processing the information. This is serious." "Rose, very serious." He looked around before continuing. "I've been watching Helena ever since she came into Richard's life. There's something calculated about her actions, as if every move is part of a larger plan. Do you think she wants to get rid of Leo permanently?" Rose asked, verbalizing her greatest fear. "I don't know exactly what she wants, but I know that Leo is an obstacle for her. As long as he exists, Helena will never have total control over Richard or his fortune." Rose felt a shiver run down her spine. "We have to protect him," she said with determination. "Yes, but we need to be cautious. Helena is smart and has Richard completely entangled in her web. A direct accusation without concrete proof could backfire on us." Mark paused, thinking. "Do you have any way to record what happens when no one is looking?" Rose thought of the small recorder she sometimes used to take notes when she went to the market. "I have a recorder. It's not very sophisticated, but it works." "Good, keep it with you. And try not to leave Leo alone with her under any circumstances." Mark checked his watch. "I need to speak with Richard now. He called me to discuss some changes to his will." "Changes to his will?" Rose felt a new wave of concern. "What kind of changes?" "I don't know yet. Helena might be pressuring him to make amendments that benefit her." Mark adjusted his tie, preparing to leave. "Stay alert, Rose, and know that you can count on me." After Mark left, Rose remained in the corridor, absorbing everything that had been said. The situation was even more dangerous than she had initially imagined. If Helena was convincing Richard to modify his will, it could mean her plans for Leo were advancing more quickly than Rose feared. With the recorder in mind, Rose decided to go back to her room to get it. On the way, she heard voices coming from Richard's study. The door was ajar, allowing fragments of the conversation to escape. "Boarding school is the best option for him now." "Richard," Helena was saying, her voice seductive but firm. "After yesterday's incident, it's clear he needs a more structured environment." "I don't know, Helena. He's still so young." Richard's voice sounded hesitant. It's precisely because he's young that we need to act now. That school in Switzerland has specialists in childhood trauma. They can help him overcome the loss of his mother in a way we can't hear. Rose felt her stomach sink. Helena was using the incident she herself had created as an argument to send Leo away. What if we talked to a specialist first? Someone who could come here and evaluate him. Of course, darling, if that makes you feel better, Helena agreed, her voice now softer. But think about it. The longer he stays here, reliving painful memories, the harder his recovery will be. Sometimes a new environment is the best medicine. Rose didn't need to see Helena's face to imagine the calculating expression behind the compassionate words. She continued on her way to her room, determined to get the recorder and not let it out of her sight. In her simple room in the staff wing, Rose rummaged through a drawer until she found the small device. She tested it to make sure it still worked, then slipped it into the pocket of her uniform. It wasn't much, but it might be the only chance to get concrete proof against Helena. Back in the kitchen, Rose found Leo still sitting at the table, drawing distractedly while Olivia prepared lunch. The boy looked up when she entered, a small smile lighting up his face. "Rose, where were you?" "I needed to get something from my room," she replied, sitting beside him. "What are you drawing?" Leo turned the paper so she could see. It was a drawing of a complex labyrinth with thick walls and few exits. "It's the house," he explained with unsettling calmness, "with all the places where someone could get stuck." Rose and Olivia exchanged a worried look. "Why are you drawing that, sweetie?" Rose asked, keeping her voice calm. "So I'll know how to get out if it happens again," Leo answered, continuing to trace lines on the paper. "Helena said there are other places like that one, places where no one can hear you." Rose felt a chill run down her spine. "When did she say that?" "Last night, after you left to get some water. She came to my room to say good night." He made air quotes with his fingers around the phrase good night, a surprisingly adult gesture for a child his age. "She said that if I told anyone about our game, especially Dad, she would show me much worse places in the house." Olivia, who had been listening silently while chopping vegetables, approached the table. "Leo, dear, why don't you go show your drawings to Peter in the greenhouse? He was asking about you earlier." Peter, the elderly gardener who cared for the mansion's exotic plants, was one of the few staff members Leo genuinely enjoyed visiting. The boy nodded, gathering his drawing materials. "Can I go, Rose?" "Of course." "The greenhouse is clearly visible from several windows, and Peter is trustworthy," Rose replied, understanding Olivia's intention to get the boy out of the room so they could talk. When Leo had left, Olivia moved closer, lowering her voice. "This isn't normal. Rose, that woman. There's something wrong with her." "Very wrong." Rose nodded, relieved to find someone else who noticed Helena's disturbing behavior. "She locked Leo in a secret passage yesterday, Olivia. She told him it was a game and left him there in the dark alone." Olivia's eyes widened. "My God, so that's what happened?" "Everyone was talking about the boy hiding, but it was Helena, and now she's pressuring Richard to send him to a boarding school in Switzerland. She wants to get rid of him permanently." Olivia dried her hands on her apron, a nervous gesture that betrayed her concern. "I've heard stories like this before, you know. Young women who marry rich men and then—" The sound of heels in the corridor cut their conversation short. Olivia quickly returned to her vegetables, while Rose picked up a dish towel and began drying some utensils, as if they were merely going about their domestic chores. Helena entered the kitchen with her usual elegance, wearing a casual but clearly expensive dress. Her gaze swept the room until it landed on Rose. "Ah, there you are," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Richard and I need to speak with you in the study. Now, please." The tone was polite, but the order was clear. Rose placed the dish towel on the counter, giving Olivia a meaningful look, which she returned with a discreet nod, a silent agreement that she would keep an eye on Leo. "Of course, Mrs. Sterling," Rose replied, following Helena out of the kitchen. In the hallway, Helena slowed her pace, so they walked side by side, maintaining a plastic smile on her lips. "You know, Rose," she began in a low voice, "I've always admired your dedication to this family. 20 years is a long time. It would be a shame if something were to tarnish that impeccable record." Rose kept her face impassive, though her heart had quickened. "I have nothing to hide. Mrs. Sterling." Helena laughed softly, a melodic sound that, like everything about her, felt rehearsed. We all have something to hide, dear. The question is, what are we willing to do to protect our secrets? She paused for calculated effect before continuing. Richard and I are considering important changes for Leo's well-being. We hope to have your unconditional support. The threat was clear between the lines. Rose felt the weight of the recorder in her pocket. She would have to be extremely cautious. My only concern has always been, and always will be, Leo's well-being, she replied firmly. Helena stopped abruptly, her smile vanishing for an instant as she stared at Rose with cold eyes. Then we understand each other, she said, the smile returning like a well-fitted mask. Because believe me, Rose, I also only want what's best for everyone in this family, and I will do whatever is necessary to ensure it. With that, Helena resumed her path toward the study, her heels tapping a determined rhythm on the marble floor. Rose followed, aware that she was about to face a crucial moment. Whatever Helena and Richard wanted to discuss, it would be decisive for Leo's future, and perhaps for her own. In Richard's study, the air conditioning kept the room pleasantly cool, a stark contrast to the tension that hung between those present. Richard sat behind his imposing mahogany desk, his weary face betraying a sleepless night. Helena positioned herself strategically beside him, a hand resting gently on his shoulder, a seemingly affectionate gesture that Rose interpreted as a form of control. "Rose, thank you for coming," Richard began, indicating a chair in front of him. "We want to talk about Leo." Rose sat, keeping her back straight and her hands folded in her lap. Beneath her uniform, she could feel the recorder pressed against her skin, a small security in the midst of this minefield. "As we all know," Richard continued, "yesterday's incident was disturbing. Leo gave us a terrible fright, and it raised some important concerns," Helena added softly, "about his emotional state." Rose remained silent, observing the dynamic between the couple. Helena didn't speak like a subordinate offering opinions, but like someone conducting the conversation through Richard, a skilled ventriloquist with his puppet. "We consulted a specialist this morning," Richard said, sliding a folder across the desk. "Dr. Victor Miller, a renowned child psychologist." Rose doubted any genuine consultation had occurred. There hadn't been enough time since the incident, and Richard hadn't mentioned bringing a specialist to the house. Helena was clearly orchestrating everything behind the scenes. "And what did the doctor recommend?" Rose asked, keeping her tone neutral. "He suggested that a completely new environment could benefit Leo," Helena answered, before Richard could open his mouth. "A place without traumatic triggers." "Traumatic triggers?" Rose repeated, looking directly at Richard. "This house is Leo's home, the place where he grew up, where he has memories of his mother." A shadow crossed Richard's face at the mention of his late wife, a detail not lost on Helena, who squeezed his shoulder lightly. "And perhaps that's exactly the problem." "Rose," Helena interjected with a compassionate voice, "every corner of this house reminds him of what he's lost. Dr. Miller believes it might be hindering his grieving process." Rose knew she had to be careful. A direct confrontation with Helena would be counterproductive right now, especially without proof of what had really happened the night before. "I understand the concern," she said finally, "but I think what Leo needs most right now is stability and the people who love him close by. And it's precisely because we love him that we're considering the boarding school in Switzerland." Helena countered with a benevolent smile. "The Alpine Institute is world-renowned for its therapeutic program integrated with education. Leo would have access to the best specialists, a safe environment, and he would be thousands of miles from home, alone," Rose completed, unable to fully contain herself. Richard cleared his throat, finally taking back control of the conversation. "Rose, I've trusted you for 20 years. I know how much you care about Leo." He seemed genuinely conflicted. "That's why we wanted to discuss this with you before making a final decision. Your opinion is important." Helena shot a quick glance of displeasure at her husband, which Rose caught out of the corner of her eye. "Richard, what happened yesterday?" Rose began, cautiously aware of the recorder in her pocket. "This was an opportunity to record something. Leo told me something concerning about how he ended up in that place." "Rose," Helena interrupted firmly, her smile now completely gone, "Leo is an imaginative child. We know he's had trouble distinguishing reality from fantasy since his mother's passing. Dr. Miller specifically mentioned that traumatized children often create alternative narratives to cope with stressful situations. Exactly, Richard agreed, nodding as if repeating something he had rehearsed. He probably hid on impulse and then felt ashamed, so he invented a story to justify his actions. Rose realized that Helena had prepared Richard for this conversation, anticipating any possibility of Leo revealing the truth. The manipulation was so skillful, it was almost admirable in its calculated perfection. "I see," Rose said, strategically retreating. Direct confrontation wouldn't work. She needed more concrete proof. "When do you plan to make this decision about the boarding school?" "The semester starts in 3 weeks," Helena replied promptly. "Ideally, we'd like to have everything settled by the end of this week so he has time to prepare." 3 weeks. Rose felt the urgency of the situation. If Helena managed to send Leo to Switzerland, the boy would be completely at the mercy of her influence, with no one to protect him or witness her methods. "It's a very important decision," Rose commented. "Perhaps it would be good for Leo to visit the school first, get to know the environment." "Unfortunately, there's no time for that," Helena answered quickly. "But I've prepared an informational video to show him. I'm sure he'll be excited about the facilities and activities offered." Every one of Helena's answers revealed how much she had already planned, how every detail had been considered to ensure her plan moved forward without obstacles. "There's one more thing." "Rose," Richard said, suddenly looking uncomfortable. "Helena suggested, and I agree, that it might be good for Leo to start getting used to the idea of more independence." "What does that mean exactly?" Rose asked, though she already feared the answer. "It means," Helena interjected with her melodious voice, "that your constant presence might be reinforcing Leo's emotional dependency. Dr. Miller recommended that he spend more time developing autonomy. In practical terms," Richard continued, avoiding Rose's direct gaze, "we'd like you to reduce the time you spend with him. Helena will take on more responsibilities as his stepmother to create a stronger bond before he leaves." Rose felt as if the air had been sucked out of her lungs. Helena was systematically removing every layer of protection around Leo. "I understand," she replied in a controlled voice. "And what about at night? Leo has been having frequent nightmares." "That's precisely why he needs to learn to face them on his own," Helena answered. "I won't be able to be with him in Switzerland every night, will I?" Her smile was sweet, but her eyes remained calculating. Rose realized she was being meticulously pushed aside, so Helena could have unrestricted access to Leo in the days leading up to his departure, days when anything could happen without witnesses. "If I may be frank," Rose said, deciding to risk a little more, "Leo seems frightened in Helena's presence when they are alone. Perhaps it would be better." "That's absurd," Helena exclaimed, momentarily dropping her serene facade. "I have done my utmost to be a good stepmother." "Richard, did you hear that?" Richard seemed genuinely surprised by Rose's veiled accusation. "Rose, that's a very serious statement," he said, frowning. "Helena has been tireless in her efforts to help Leo overcome his trauma. To imply that he fears her?" "I'm not implying anything, Mr. Sterling," Rose replied calmly. "I'm simply reporting what I've observed. As Leo's nanny for 10 years, I thought my observation would be relevant." Helena quickly regained her composure, returning to the role of the patient wife and dedicated stepmother. "I understand your concern." "Rose," she said with false understanding, "it's natural for you to feel insecure about the changes. After all, you practically raised Leo. It must be difficult to accept that it's time to take a step back." The insinuation was clear. Rose was being driven by jealousy or possessiveness, not genuine concern. Richard sighed, running a hand through his graying hair, a gesture Rose knew well, indicating his discomfort with conflict. "Look, Rose, no one is questioning your dedication to Leo. On the contrary, but we all need to work together in this new phase for his sake." Rose realized she was losing ground quickly. Helena had manipulated the situation to put her on the defensive, making her concerns seem irrational or motivated by personal interests. "Of course, Mr. Sterling," she finally replied. "My only concern has always been Leo's well-being." "Excellent," Helena interjected, clearly eager to end the conversation. "So from today, you will only be with Leo during his lessons and at mealtimes. I will handle his afternoon activities and his bedtime routine." Rose felt a wave of panic but kept her expression neutral. How could she protect Leo if she barely had access to him? "There's one more thing," Helena added with a polite smile. "Richard and I have planned a short weekend trip to the country estate. We'll leave tomorrow and be back Sunday night. It will be good for Leo to have a change of scenery before the big move." "A trip?" Rose couldn't hide her surprise. "So suddenly?" "It was my idea," Helena explained, stroking Richard's shoulder. "I thought we all needed a break after yesterday's scare. And it will be a good opportunity to strengthen our family bonds, won't it?" Rose immediately understood the strategy. An isolated weekend away from any watchful eyes, where Helena would have total control over Leo and could continue her psychological manipulation without interference. "Of course," she replied, trying to buy time to think. "Leo is very fond of the estate. Actually, Rose," Richard said, again looking uncomfortable, "we thought we'd go just the three of us. A family moment, you understand." Helena's plan was complete, to completely isolate Leo from his most trusted protector. "I understand perfectly," Rose said, maintaining a professional tone despite the red alert blaring in her mind. "When do you plan to tell Leo about the boarding school?" "We thought we'd tell him on Sunday on the way back," Helena replied. "After a pleasant weekend, he'll be more receptive to the idea." Rose nodded mechanically, her mind working furiously to find a way to protect Leo. Time was running out fast. "If there's nothing else to discuss," Helena said, moving toward the door, "I believe we all have tasks to attend to. Rose, could you see to it that Leo's bags are packed for the weekend?" "Certainly," Rose replied, standing up. "Excuse me." As she left the study, Rose felt the weight of the recorder in her pocket. She had managed to record part of the conversation, but she doubted there was anything incriminating enough to stop Helena's plans. She needed to find more concrete proof, and quickly. In the hallway, away from the eyes of Richard and Helena, Rose allowed herself a moment of true panic. The situation was more dire than she had imagined. Helena was systematically and efficiently isolating Leo, creating the perfect conditions for whatever dark plan she had in mind. And most alarmingly, she was about to have an entire weekend, isolated with the boy to advance her goals. Rose knew she couldn't let Leo go on that trip, nor could she let him be sent to a boarding school in Switzerland. But how could she stop it without concrete proof of Helena's intentions? How could she convince Richard that the woman he loved posed a real danger to his own son? Time was running out, and Rose needed a plan, something that would expose Helena's true face before it was too late for Leo. Rose found Leo in the library, engrossed in one of his favorite books about explorers. Upon seeing her, the boy smiled, but his smile quickly faded to concern when he noticed the nanny's tense expression. "What happened, Rose? You have that look." "What look?" she asked, trying to soften her expression as she sat beside him. "The look you get when something's wrong but you don't want to scare me." Rose was always surprised by Leo's perceptiveness. For a 10-year-old, his ability to read people was remarkable, a talent inherited from his mother, Fiona, whom Richard used to describe as intuitively connected to others' emotions. "Leo," Rose began, choosing her words carefully, "your father and Helena are planning a trip to the country estate tomorrow." "The three of us?" he asked, already guessing the answer. "You, your father, and Helena," Rose confirmed. "They want to spend some family time together." Leo slowly closed the book, his small face taking on an expression far too serious for his age. "You're not going then," he concluded. It wasn't a question. "No, sweetie, not this time." The boy was silent for a moment, absorbing the information. "It's a trap," he said finally, his voice so low Rose could barely hear it. "She wants to get me away from you. Like yesterday." Leo's frankness broke Rose's heart. He perfectly understood the danger Helena represented, but was caught in a web of adult manipulations he couldn't fight alone. "Leo, I need you to tell me exactly what happened last night," Rose asked, discreetly turning on the recorder in her pocket. "Every detail you can remember." Leo glanced nervously at the library door before he began to speak. "I was sleeping when Helena came into my room. She was different, smiling, but not like she smiles when other people are around. It was a cold smile." He paused, searching for the right words. "She said she had a special surprise, a secret place to show me, and that it would be our secret." Weren't you scared to go with her? Rose asked gently. I was, Leo admitted. But she said if I didn't go, she'd tell Dad I had stolen things from his study, and that he'd be so angry he'd send me to a boarding school. His eyes filled with tears. I didn't steal anything, Rose, I swear. I know, sweetie, Rose assured him, holding his hand. Go on. She took me down the dark hallway to the portrait of Mom. She said there was a secret behind it, a place Mom had prepared for me before. He swallowed hard. Before she left. I was confused because Mom had never told me about it, but Helena opened the wall and said I should go inside to find the present. Rose felt her heart clench with every word from Leo. Helena's cruelty in using the memory of his late mother to manipulate the boy was almost unbearable to hear. When I went in, it was very dark. I asked where the present was, and she said, "This is the surprise," and closed the door. I heard her laughing softly on the other side, and then... Silence. Leo's voice trembled. I yelled. I pounded on the door, but the walls were too thick. No one could hear me. How long were you in there, Leo? I'm not sure. It felt like a long time. I tried counting the seconds like you taught me to do when I'm nervous, but I lost count after 1,000. He looked at Rose with frightened eyes. She's going to do something worse at the estate, isn't she? That's why she doesn't want you to go. Leo's direct question put Rose in a difficult position. She didn't want to increase his fear, but she couldn't leave him unprotected either. I don't know what Helena is planning, Leo, but I promise I won't let anything bad happen to you. Rose gently squeezed the boy's hand. We need to be smart and careful. And most importantly, we need to make your father see who Helena really is. Dad doesn't believe me, Leo said sadly. He always says I'm making up stories when I talk about how Helena acts when we're alone. That's why we need proof, Rose explained, discreetly indicating the pocket with the recorder. I'm recording our conversation now, and that might help. But we need more. Leo nodded, understanding the seriousness of the situation. What should I do? For now, don't show that you suspect anything. If Helena asks about our conversation, just say we talked about the books you're reading. Rose quickly thought about the next steps. And if she tries to take you somewhere alone, make an excuse to stay near other people. Say you're feeling sick, or that you need to use the restroom. What about the trip to the estate? Do I have to go? Rose considered the options. Preventing the trip would be ideal, but how could she do that without raising suspicion? I'll think of something by tomorrow, she promised. Maybe we can make you suddenly get sick. At that moment, the sound of heels in the corridor made them both fall silent instantly. Rose turned off the recorder seconds before Helena entered the library, impeccable in a navy blue dress that accentuated her light eyes. Ah, here you are, she said with her rehearsed smile. Leo, darling, we need to buy a few things for our trip to the estate. I thought we could go to the mall together. Just the two of us. The look of panic Leo shot Rose lasted only an instant before the boy recomposed his expression. I'd rather stay and read if you don't mind, he replied politely. I'm at the most interesting part of the book. Helena's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. Don't be silly, dear. Books can wait. We can stop for ice cream afterward. What do you say? Rose intervened softly. I'm sorry, Mrs. Sterling, but Leo has his math lesson in 40 minutes. His tutor, Alan, should be on his way. Helena shot Rose a cold glare, her mask of kindness momentarily forgotten. I think an afternoon of shopping with his stepmother is more important than a lesson that can be rescheduled. Don't you agree, Rose? Her tone was soft but carried a clear threat. Unfortunately, Rose replied firmly, it was Mr. Sterling who insisted that Leo's lessons not be interrupted this week, especially math, since he's been falling behind. It was a lie, of course, but Rose knew Helena would hesitate to contradict a direct order from Richard, especially one related to Leo's education, a subject on which his father was particularly inflexible. Helena narrowed her eyes, clearly suspicious but with no grounds to argue. Very well, she said finally. We'll go after the lesson then. I'll be in my room, Leo. Come find me as soon as you're finished with your tutor. When Helena left, Leo let out a sigh of relief so deep it seemed he had been holding his breath the entire time. Thank you, he whispered to Rose. She was going to take me somewhere, I know it. There's no math lesson today, is there? He asked after a moment. No, Rose confirmed. But we're going to have to pretend there is. I'm going to call Alan and ask him to come over urgently. He's always liked you and will understand the situation." The rest of the day passed in a state of restrained tension. Rose managed to contact Alan, a young mathematician who tutored Leo 3 times a week. Without going into compromising details, she explained that they needed to keep Leo occupied and supervised for the afternoon, away from Helena. Alan, who had always been observant enough to notice the strange dynamic between Leo and his stepmother, readily agreed, arriving in record time with extra material for a full review. During the impromptu lesson, Rose took the opportunity to execute the next part of her plan. She went to Helena and Richard's room, where the bags for the trip were being packed by one of the maids. "You can leave this to me, Agnes," Rose said to the young maid. "I know exactly what Leo needs to pack." Agnes, relieved to return to her other duties, left the room without question. Once she was alone, Rose quickly checked Helena's makeup bag, which was open on the vanity. Among the various luxury products, she found what she was looking for, a bottle of eye drops. With her heart racing, Rose swapped the bottle for a nearly identical one from her pocket, a common eye drop, but one that caused temporary redness and mild irritation, used by actors to simulate crying. It wasn't dangerous, but it would be enough to fake a convincing case of pink eye in Leo the next morning, preventing the trip to the estate. It was a risky and improvised plan, but Rose was desperate. She needed to buy time to gather more concrete evidence against Helena, and she couldn't allow Leo to be completely at the stepmother's mercy for an entire weekend. After packing Leo's clothes for the trip, a trip she was determined to prevent, Rose left the room as quietly as she had entered. As she walked down the hall, she reflected on her next steps. The recorder now held Leo's testimony about the incident in the secret passage, but would it be enough? Helena could easily discredit the boy's words, attributing them to a child's imagination or a desire for attention. Richard, blinded by love for his new wife, would likely accept that explanation. Rose needed something more, something irrefutable that would expose Helena's true intentions. At the end of the hall, she found Mark Linden leaving Richard's study. The lawyer looked worried, his usually composed face now marked with lines of tension. "Mr. Linden," Rose called, quickening her pace to catch up with him. Mark stopped, glancing around quickly to ensure they were alone. "Rose, I was just thinking of how to find you discreetly." "Did something happen?" she asked, noticing the gravity in his expression. "Richard signed the preliminary papers for the boarding school in Switzerland," he informed her in a low voice. "And he made changes to his will." Rose felt her stomach sink. What kind of changes? The kind that significantly benefits Helena if something were to happen to him. Or to Leo. Mark nervously adjusted his glasses. "I tried to advise him against it, but Helena was present for the entire meeting. She has an influence over him that I've never seen before." "She's planning something for this weekend," Rose said urgently. "A trip to the estate, just the 3 of them. I'm afraid of what might happen away from any witnesses." Mark nodded grimly. "I suspected something like this was coming when I saw the rush to finalize the documents." He hesitated before adding, "Rose, there's something about Helena I discovered recently. Something Richard is completely unaware of." "What is it?" Rose asked, feeling that they might finally have an advantage. "She's not who she says she is," Mark replied, lowering his voice even more. The background she presented to Richard, her supposed aristocratic European family, the social connections, all fabricated. "I hired a private investigator when I started to suspect her intentions, and he found that Helena has had at least 3 different identities in the last 10 years. And in each case she got close to wealthy men, recently widowed or divorced." Rose tried to process the information. "And what happened to these men?" Mark's gaze darkened. 2 of them suffered suspicious accidents. The 3rd lost everything in disastrous business deals, she advised, and ended up having a severe emotional breakdown. "My God," Rose whispered, the gravity of the situation hitting her with full force. "She's a predator." "Precisely," Mark confirmed. "And now she has Richard exactly where she wants him, emotionally dependent, legally vulnerable, and about to remove the only obstacle between her and his fortune." "Leo," Rose concluded, a chill running down her spine. "We need to act fast." "Rose, I have some of the evidence with me, but it's not enough for immediate legal intervention. If we could delay this trip somehow. I'm already working on that, Rose assured him. But we need a plan to expose Helena for good before it's too late. Mark checked his watch and frowned. I have to go now. Helena has scheduled a meeting with the family accountant in half an hour, and I need to be there. He took a small card from his pocket and discreetly handed it to Rose. My personal number. Call me any time, day or night, if the situation gets worse. Rose pocketed the card, feeling simultaneously relieved to have an ally and terrified by the confirmation of her worst suspicions. Helena wasn't just a controlling stepmother. She was an experienced criminal, methodically setting up her next strike, and Leo was directly in her path. Night fell on the Sterling mansion, bringing with it a deceptive quiet. In Leo's room, Rose applied 2 drops of the special eye solution to the boy's eyes, which he blinked rapidly as the mild irritation set in. It stings a little, he said, carefully rubbing his eyes. That's normal, Rose assured him. By morning, your eyes will be red and swollen enough to convince your father to cancel the trip. But don't worry, the effect wears off completely in 24 hours. Leo nodded, trusting Rose's plan completely. She tucked the covers around him, trying to convey a sense of security she didn't fully feel. I tried to talk to Dad about Helena today, Leo confessed in a low voice. I told him I didn't want to go to the estate with just them. Rose felt a pang in her chest. What did he say? Oh, that I was being unfair to Helena, that she only wants what's best for our family. Leo's voice trembled slightly. And then he said I should stop making up stories about her, that it could damage relationships. As if I was lying, Rose. Rose sat on the edge of the bed, gently holding the boy's hand. Your father is confused right now, Leo. Helena has a special way of making people believe her. It's not his fault. What if he never believes me? Leo asked, his eyes already beginning to show signs of the irritation from the eye drops. What if he lets her send me away? That's not going to happen, Rose promised with a firmness she hoped she could deliver on. Mark and I are working to show your father the truth. We just need a little more time. After Leo finally fell asleep, Rose kept a vigilant watch by his side. She didn't trust Helena not to try some maneuver during the night. Around 11 o'clock, her fears were confirmed when the bedroom door opened silently. Rose, sitting in the dim light of a corner armchair, remained motionless as Helena snuck into the room. The woman approached Leo's bed, watching him sleep. There was something unsettling in her posture. It was not the gaze of a concerned stepmother, but the cold calculation of someone assessing an obstacle. He's not alone, Rose said finally, her voice breaking the silence. Helena spun around, placing a hand on her chest in feigned surprise. Rose, you startled me. I just came to check if he was sleeping well. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Shouldn't you be in your own room at this hour? Leo had nightmares, Rose replied calmly, standing up. I asked Mr. Sterling for permission to stay with him tonight. It was a lie, of course, but Rose gambled that Helena wouldn't risk checking with Richard so late. Such admirable dedication, Helena commented, her tone bordering on sarcasm. But I'm afraid this might be feeding Leo's emotional dependency. As we discussed earlier, it's important for him to learn to deal with his fears on his own. Nightmares aren't just fears. Mrs. Sterling, Rose replied, keeping her voice low so as not to wake Leo. They are responses to real trauma. For a moment, the two women faced each in the dimness of the room. The only sound, the soft breathing of Leo. It was a silent battle of wills, the protector versus the predator. You know, Rose, Helena said finally, adjusting the silk robe she wore, I've always wondered why you never built a life of your own. 20 years taking care of someone else's child. Don't you feel like you've missed out on something? The attempt to hit her personally was transparent, but Rose wouldn't rise to the bait. My life is exactly as I've chosen it to be, she replied simply. And Leo is family to me. Family, Helena repeated, a cold smile curving her lips. What an interesting concept. So fluid, so malleable. She took a step toward the door before adding, I hope you're ready to let him go when the time comes. Because it will come, Rose, sooner than you think. When the door closed behind Helena, Rose let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. The threat in Helena's words was undeniable. Time was running out. In the morning, as planned, Leo woke up with red, swollen eyes. involuntary tears streaming down his cheeks. "It hurts," he murmured, keeping his eyes half closed against the light. "I know, sweetie," Rose replied, feeling a pang of guilt for causing him discomfort, even knowing it was to protect him. "Let's go show your father now." Richard was having breakfast on the veranda when Rose arrived with Leo. Helena had not yet come down, which was perfect for her plan. "My God, Leo!" Richard exclaimed upon seeing the state of his son's eyes. "What happened?" "He woke up like this," Rose explained, gently holding the boy's shoulders. "It looks like a bad case of pink eye. I've already set out the medicine, but the doctor always recommends complete rest for at least 48 hours to prevent it from spreading." Richard frowned, placing a hand on Leo's forehead to check for a fever. "Does this mean the trip?" he began. "Will have to be postponed," Rose completed firmly. "Pink eye is highly contagious, and the environment at the estate, with dust and pollen, would only make his condition worse." The businessman sighed, clearly disappointed. Helena is not going to like this. She planned everything so carefully. At that moment, as if summoned by the mention of her name, Helena appeared on the veranda, radiant in an elegant outfit clearly chosen for the trip. "Good morning, family." Her smile froze when she noticed Leo's inflamed eyes. "What happened to you?" "Pink eye," Richard answered before Rose could speak. "It looks like we'll have to postpone our trip, darling." Helena narrowed her eyes, looking from Leo to Rose with evident suspicion. "What an unfortunate coincidence," she commented, approaching to examine Leo's eyes. "Let me see more closely, dear." Leo instinctively pulled back, partially hiding behind Rose. "It hurts in the light," he mumbled. Helena shot Rose a piercing look, as if she could read her intentions. "Perhaps we should call Dr. Aaron to examine him properly," she suggested with false concern. "It could be something more serious." "There's no need to bother the doctor for pink eye," Rose replied quickly. "We've been through this before. 2 days of rest, antibiotic eye drops, and cold compresses will solve the problem." Helena didn't look convinced, but Richard intervened. "Rose is right. There's no cause for alarm. We can reschedule the trip for next weekend." He turned to Helena with a conciliatory smile. "It might even be for the best. I have a few loose ends at the office I could tie up today." The effort it took Helena to maintain her mask of the understanding wife as her plan crumbled was visible. "Of course, darling," she finally replied, stroking Richard's arm. "Leo's health comes first, always." For the rest of the morning, Rose kept Leo in his room, applying cold compresses to his eyes to ease the discomfort. The boy endured it all stoically, understanding the importance of the charade. "Helena is furious, isn't she?" he asked at one point. "Probably," Rose admitted, changing the compress. "But this gives us time to gather more evidence against her. How are we going to do that?" Leo's voice revealed a mix of fear and determination that broke Rose's heart. "Mark is working on it," she replied. "And I have a few ideas too. The important thing is that we managed to keep you from being alone with her this weekend." In the early afternoon, Rose left Leo resting under Olivia's care to secretly meet with Mark, who had asked to see her urgently. They arranged to meet at a small cafe 3 blocks from the mansion, a discreet place where they were unlikely to run into acquaintances. Mark was already waiting at a table in the back when she arrived. His usually composed face showed clear signs of worry. "Did you manage to stop the trip?" he asked as soon as Rose sat down. "For now," she confirmed. "Leo has a convenient case of pink eye that requires rest." Mark nodded, understanding the strategy. "Good, but that only buys us a short window. The investigator I hired found more information on Helena, and it's even more disturbing than we imagined." He slid a discreet folder across the table. Rose opened it carefully, finding photographs of Helena, or someone who looked very much like her, in different guises, accompanied by different men. "Christina Holt, Tiana Vega, Elise Moreau," Mark listed, pointing to different images, all aliases she used over the last 15 years. In each case, the pattern is the same. She gets close to wealthy men, recently widowed or divorced, often with children. She wins their trust, isolates them from friends and family, and then— "The accidents," Rose completed, a knot forming in her stomach. "Exactly. Nothing that could be directly linked to her, of course." She's meticulous. "A seemingly natural stroke. A car accident on a wet road. An emotional breakdown followed by severe self-harm. Rose studied the photos, recognizing the same calculating eyes, the same rehearsed smile she knew so well, just framed by different hair and clothes. And the children? What happened to them? Mark hesitated, which alarmed Rose even more. Two were sent to distant boarding schools shortly before the accidents involving their fathers. They lost contact with family, were placed under Helena's legal guardianship for a brief period before she disappeared with the family's money. The third, he paused, visibly disturbed. The third, a boy about Leo's age, disappeared mysteriously days before his father's emotional collapse. He was considered a runaway for a time until... Until what? Rose insisted, her heart hammering in her chest. Until the father, in a moment of lucidity during his breakdown, claimed his wife had done something to the boy. No one believed him, of course. He was already mentally unstable, and Helena, or Diana, as she was called then, played the part of the wife devastated by the double tragedy perfectly. Rose closed the folder, unable to look at the images any longer. The story Mark was telling confirmed her worst fears. Helena wasn't just manipulative, she was potentially lethal. Richard and Leo are in real danger, she said, her voice almost failing. We need to go to the police immediately. It's not that simple, Mark replied, rubbing his tired eyes. We have no hard evidence linking Helena directly to any crime. Just circumstantial coincidences and behavioral patterns. The police would listen, but without concrete evidence. And Helena is extremely skilled at presenting herself as an innocent victim. So what do we do? Rose asked, despair threatening to overwhelm her. Mark leaned across the table, lowering his voice even further. We need to catch her in the act. Provoke her somehow into revealing her true intentions where others can witness it. How? I've been thinking about this since yesterday. Mark took another envelope from the folder and handed it to Rose. In 3 days, Richard is hosting a charity gala at the mansion. All the important names in the city will be there. Helena, always eager for social recognition, will be at the center of attention. Rose opened the envelope, finding an elegant invitation to the gala. You want to confront her publicly during the party. Not confront her exactly, but create a situation where she exposes herself. Mark seemed to be choosing his words carefully. The investigator I hired managed to locate someone from her past, someone Helena believes can no longer testify against her. Who? The sister of one of her previous victims, a woman named Clara, who spent years trying to prove the involvement of Helena, then Diana Vega, in the tragedy that destroyed her family. Helena has never met her in person, but she knows Clara is a threat to her operations. And this Clara has agreed to help? More than that. She's been waiting years for an opportunity like this. Mark checked his watch nervously. The plan is this. Clara will attend the party as an anonymous donor. At a certain point, I'll introduce her to Helena as a potential business partner. The shock of seeing someone she believes could recognize her, someone connected to her criminal past, in an environment where her impeccable social image is crucial. You expect her to lose control, Rose concluded, understanding the strategy. Exactly. Helena maintains absolute control over her facade in planned situations, but confronted with a ghost from her past, at an event so important for her public image. It's risky, Rose observed. What if she simply keeps her composure? Or worse, what if she realizes it's a trap and decides to act against Leo before we can expose her? That's why we need your help, Rose. You know the house routine. You have access to Leo. We need to ensure he's protected throughout the entire process. Mark hesitated before adding, and ideally we'd need some preliminary proof, something that leaves Richard with at least a seed of doubt about Helena before the confrontation. Rose thought of the recorder in her pocket. With Leo's testimony about the incident in the secret passage, I have Leo's account on tape, she said. But as you noted, Helena can easily dismiss it as a child's imagination. Perhaps, Mark agreed. But if we could provoke her into saying or doing something incriminating, something we could capture as evidence. An idea began to form in Rose's mind. Dangerous. Risky but potentially effective. The secret passages, she said suddenly. Helena doesn't know that I know about all of them. If I could strategically place the recorder, perhaps during a private conversation between her and Richard. That would be too risky for you, Rose, Mark warned. If Helena finds out you're spying, It's a risk I have to take, Rose replied with determination. For Leo. Mark studied her for a moment, recognizing the resolve in her eyes. 3 days, he said finally. We have 3 days to gather enough evidence and prepare for the confrontation during the charity gala. After that, he didn't need to finish the sentence. They both knew what was at stake. Not just Richard's fortune, but potentially his and Leo's lives. When Rose left the cafe, the afternoon was already fading. The folder with the evidence of Helena's past was tucked safely in her bag. In her mind, she repeated like a mantra, 3 days. Just 3 days to unmask an experienced predator and protect the family she loved. On the horizon, dark clouds were gathering, a harbinger of the storm to come, both in the sky and at the Sterling mansion. The night of the charity gala arrived with dizzying speed. In the 3 days leading up to it, the Sterling mansion transformed into a silent battlefield where every move, every word, every glance carried hidden meaning. Helena, having recovered from the frustration of the cancelled trip, focused obsessively on the event preparations, determined to impress high society as the perfect hostess. Leo, now fully recovered from his fake pink eye, stayed close to Rose whenever possible. The boy had become surprisingly adept at avoiding being alone with Helena, inventing urgent school assignments or activities that required his nanny's supervision. Rose, for her part, performed a delicate ballet of surveillance and investigation. Following the plan she'd developed with Mark, she had strategically placed small recorders in key locations around the mansion, in Richard's study, the master suite, and one of the secret passages she knew Helena occasionally used for discreet movements through the house. The biggest discovery, however, came on the eve of the party. While organizing Leo's closet, under Helena's express orders to prepare clothes for an imminent trip, Rose found a folder hidden in the back of the stepmother's lingerie drawer. Among various documents were partially filled-out forms for the legal custody transfer of Leo, with Richard's signature already affixed to some of them, clear evidence that Helena was accelerating her plans to gain total control over the boy. Even more disturbing, among the documents was a life insurance policy in Richard's name for an astronomical sum with a single beneficiary, Helena. The policy was recent, its date coinciding with the period when Helena had started pushing for the trip to the country estate. The discovery confirmed Rose's darkest suspicions. Helena wasn't just planning to send Leo away, but also to eliminate Richard after securing access to his fortune. Now, as she supervised the final adjustments to Leo's formal attire for the party, Rose felt the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. The evidence was stored in a safe place, ready to be presented at the right moment. Mark had confirmed that Clara would arrive discreetly, an hour after the party started, giving Helena time to become fully immersed in her role as the impeccable hostess. "You look very handsome," Rose said, adjusting the bow tie on Leo's small tuxedo. "Do I really have to go?" the boy asked, his discomfort evident. "Helena will be watching me the whole time. It's important that you're there, at least at the beginning," Rose explained gently. "Your father expects it, and we need to keep up appearances until the right moment." She knelt to be at the boy's eye level. "Besides, we agreed you'd only stay until 9, remember? Then you'll come back to the room with me, away from all the commotion." Leo nodded, not entirely convinced. "What if something goes wrong? What if Helena figures out what you're planning?" The boy's insight never ceased to amaze Rose. Despite their efforts to shield him from the darker details of the plan, Leo intuitively understood the gravity of the situation. "Mark and I have thought of everything," Rose assured him, even as she felt her own uncertainty weighing on her chest. "The most important thing is that you are never alone with Helena, under any circumstances. If she tries to take you anywhere, find your father or me immediately." A light knock on the door interrupted them. Richard entered, elegant in his tuxedo, his graying hair carefully styled. For a moment, Rose glimpsed the man for whom she had harbored a quiet admiration for so many years, strong, principled, protective, before Helena's toxic influence began to transform him. "How are the preparations in here?" he asked, smiling at the sight of his formally dressed son. "Look at you, a real gentleman." Leo smiled shyly, momentarily buoyed by his father's approval. "Dad, I need to tell you something," the boy began, suddenly serious. Rose's heart quickened. They had agreed not to confront Richard before the planned moment at the party. "Leo," she warned softly. Richard looked from one to the other, intrigued. "What is it, son?" Leo hesitated, looking at Rose as if for permission. She gave an imperceptible shake of her head, signaling that this was not the time. I just wanted to say I'm glad we didn't go to the estate," Leo improvised. "I much prefer being at the party with you." Richard's face softened. "Me too, son. And don't worry, we'll have our weekend together soon. Helena is already planning it." He checked his watch. "The first guests should be arriving. Shall we go down? Helena wants us all to greet them as a united family." The emphasis on the word family made Rose shudder inwardly. Helena was a master at manipulating Richard's deepest desires, his longing to rebuild a family after the painful loss of Fiona. The first guests were already mingling in the main hall when Rose, Richard and Leo descended. Helena awaited them at the foot of the staircase, stunning in a long sapphire satin gown that accentuated her slender figure. Discreet but visibly expensive jewelry completed the look, carefully crafted to project an image of understated elegance, the perfect wife of a powerful man. "Finally," she murmured with a tense smile as they approached. "I thought I'd have to greet the Carmichaels alone." Richard kissed her lightly on the cheek. "We're all here now," he replied, placing a protective hand on Leo's shoulder. "The complete family, just as you wanted." The look Helena shot Leo contained an icy glint that only Rose seemed to notice. "Perfect," Helena said, arranging everyone's position for the receiving line. "Leo, darling, stand between your father and me. Rose, could you stand a little to the side? We don't want to confuse the guests about who's who in the family." The jab was typical of Helena, subtly reasserting her position while diminishing Rose to the status of a mere employee. Richard, oblivious to the dynamic between the two women, just nodded distractedly, already greeting an approaching couple. The next 90 minutes were a parade of power, influence, and wealth. Politicians, business leaders, celebrities, and socialites circulated through the mansion's lavishly decorated halls, all gravitating at some point toward Richard and Helena. He, the powerful businessman whose fortune funded countless projects. She, the stunning new wife who had captured the heart of high society's most eligible widower. Rose remained strategically positioned, always keeping Leo within sight. She occasionally checked her watch, aware that Clara should be arriving any moment. Mark was already present, talking discreetly with select guests, preparing the ground for what was to come. At 9 o'clock sharp, as planned, Rose approached to take Leo to his room. The boy looked exhausted from the effort of keeping up appearances among so many strangers. "Time to go up, Leo," she said gently. "It's getting late." Helena, who was chatting animatedly with the senator's wife, turned abruptly upon hearing this. "But so early," she protested with a forced smile. "The night has just begun, and several guests haven't even had a chance to greet our little man." "It was the arrangement, Helena," Richard replied, surprisingly firm. "Leo has school early tomorrow. Besides, this kind of event is tiring for a child." For a brief moment, Helena's mask faltered, a flash of irritation crossing her perfectly made-up face. But she quickly regained her composure, leaning down to kiss Leo's cheek. "Of course, darling. Rest well. Tomorrow we have a lot to talk about regarding that surprise I mentioned." Leo flinched slightly at Helena's touch, a movement almost imperceptible to most, but one Rose caught immediately. "What surprise?" Richard asked, curious. Helena smiled mysteriously. "Just some plans I have for the near future. Nothing to worry about now?" She turned to Rose, her gaze hardening slightly. "Rose, after you put Leo to bed, could you return to help with the guests? Olivia is a bit overwhelmed in the kitchen." It was an order disguised as a request, an attempt to keep Rose away from the party during the critical period that was approaching. Before Rose could reply, Mark approached the group, impeccable in his dark suit. "Richard, Helena," he greeted cordially. "Magnificent party, as always. Helena, I'd like to introduce you to someone very special when you have a moment, a potential donor for the foundation." Helena's immediate interest was predictable. Richard's charitable foundation, which she now co-chaired, was her passport to the social legitimacy she so craved. "Of course, Mark. Who is it?" "Mrs. Clara Linden, my distant cousin. She's just returned after years of living in Europe. She has considerable wealth. and a specific interest in children's causes. Rose noticed the momentary tension in Helena's shoulders upon hearing. The surname Linden, quickly masked by a radiant smile. A relative of yours. Why didn't you mention it before? I would love to meet her. She prefers to be discreet, Mark explained. She's just arrived. Should be in the main hall now. We could find her in, say, 15 minutes. That's enough time for Rose to settle Leo and return to the party, since you seem to need her. The look Helena shot Mark contained a poorly concealed irritation, but her smile remained intact. Perfect. I'll look forward to meeting her. As Rose led Leo up the stairs, she felt Helena's gaze fixed on her back, calculating, assessing. The plan was in motion, but the risk was growing exponentially. In his room, she helped Leo change from his formal suit into comfortable pajamas. Are you going back to the party? He asked, concern evident in his voice. I have to, Rose confirmed, sitting on the edge of his bed. Mark and Clara need me there, but Olivia will come stay with you, and the door will be locked from the inside. Don't open it for anyone but me or your father, understand? Leo nodded solemnly. I'm scared of what's going to happen, he confessed in a low voice. Rose held his small hands in hers. I'm a little scared too, she admitted. But sometimes we have to face our fears to protect the ones we love. You taught me that, you know. With your courage these past few days. A small smile appeared on the boy's face. Promise you'll be okay? I promise, Rose replied, kissing his forehead. And tomorrow when you wake up, everything will be different, better. Olivia arrived a few minutes later, carrying a tray with hot chocolate and cookies, a special treat for the tense evening. Rose carefully instructed her not to let anyone in, under any circumstances, and checked 3 times that the door was properly locked before heading back downstairs. The party was in full swing when Rose returned to the main hall. The orchestra played softly in a corner. Couples danced in the center, and groups chatted animatedly in small circles. Helena moved about like a social butterfly, her crystalline laugh occasionally rising above the general murmur. Rose located Mark near the bar, talking to an elegant woman with dark hair pulled back in a severe bun. Even from a distance, Rose recognized the determination in the woman's eyes. That had to be Clara, the sister who had been seeking justice for years. Approaching discreetly, Rose positioned herself to observe without being immediately noticed. Mark saw her and gave a slight nod, signaling that everything was on track. Rose, he called as she drew near. I'd like to introduce you to Mrs. Clara Linden. The 2 women exchanged a meaningful handshake. Mark told me about your dedication to Leo, Clara said, her voice controlled but laden with restrained emotion. Thank you for helping to stop history from repeating itself. Rose nodded, feeling the weight of those words. Has Helena seen you yet? She asked in a low voice. Not yet, Mark replied, but the moment is approaching. Did you get Leo settled safely? Yes, Olivia is with him. The door is locked, and they have instructions not to open it for anyone but me or Richard. Clara took a deep breath, adjusting her posture. Let's end this once and for all, she said with determination. I've waited too long to see her face when she realizes her game is over. Mark discreetly raised a hand, signaling caution. Remember the plan. No direct confrontation at first. We need her to expose herself naturally. Clara nodded, though Rose could see it was costing the woman to contain years of accumulated anger. Mark checked his watch and made a subtle gesture to Richard, who was talking with some nearby guests. The businessman nodded back, indicating he would join them shortly. Helena's coming, Mark murmured, seeing the hostess approach across the hall. Rose felt her heart race. This was it. Years of manipulation, months of suspicion, days of meticulous planning, all converging on this moment. Helena approached with her graceful walk, the satin dress reflecting the light of the chandeliers as she moved among the guests. Her rehearsed smile was fixed in place, her eyes calculating every social interaction with pinpoint precision. "Mark, finally!" she exclaimed as she reached them. "I thought I was going to have to search the whole party for you." "Helena," Mark replied formally, "I'd like to introduce you to my cousin, Clara Linden." The 2 women faced each other. Helena's smile froze for an almost imperceptible fraction of a second before widening again. Her eyes quickly scanned Clara's face, searching for any sign of recognition. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Linden," Helena said, extending her hand. "Mark mentioned your interest in our foundation." Clara accepted the handshake, holding Helena's hand a second longer than necessary. "The pleasure is mine," she replied with forced calm. "I've been following your work with great interest." Something in the intonation, in the way Clara emphasized the word work, made Helena's mask waver slightly. "Really? How did you hear about the foundation?" Helena asked, maintaining her composure despite the growing tension in her posture. "Oh, not just the foundation," Clara replied with an enigmatic smile. "Your work in general. I have a special interest in behavioral patterns." Helena shot a quick glance at Mark as if trying to gauge how much he knew, how much he had revealed. "Fascinating," she replied with false lightness. "And what is your field of work, Mrs. Linden?" "Investigation," Clara answered directly. "Especially cold cases. The ones that fall through the cracks of the system." Helena's face remained composed, but Rose, watching closely, noticed the slight tremor in her hands, the way her fingers squeezed the champagne flute with unnecessary force. At that moment, Richard joined the group, placing an arm affectionately around Helena's waist. "Mark, I see you've made the introductions," he commented with a warm smile for Clara. "Welcome to our home. Mrs. Linden, any cousin of Mark's is practically family to us." "Family," Clara repeated, her gaze fixed on Helena. "A fascinating concept, isn't it? How people can move in and out of families. How identities can change." Helena paled visibly but kept her smile. "Richard, darling, I just remembered I need to check on something in the kitchen. Could you entertain our guests for a moment?" "Of course," he replied, clearly not sensing the growing tension. "But don't be long, I want to hear more about Mrs. Linden's work." As Helena tried to step away, Clara took a step forward, subtly blocking her path. "Actually, I have a particular curiosity about your wife, Mr. Sterling. She seems strangely familiar." The tension in the air became palpable. Helena stood motionless like a cornered animal assessing escape routes. "I'm sorry?" Richard asked, confused. "Your wife," Clara continued, each word carefully articulated. "She reminds me of someone I knew some years ago. A woman named Diana Vega. Do you know that name, Mrs. Sterling?" The impact of the name was visible on Helena's face. For a brief moment, her mask crumbled completely, revealing the pure panic behind the carefully constructed facade. "I don't know what you're talking about," she replied, her voice suddenly harsh. "Richard, this woman is obviously confused, or—" "I'm not confused," Clara interrupted firmly. "Just as I'm not confused about Christina Holt or Elise Moreau. All names you used before, weren't they? Before people close to you suffered. Convenient accidents." Richard looked from one to the other, completely bewildered. "What is she talking about, Helena?" Helena partially regained her composure, forcing a light laugh. "I have no idea. This woman clearly has problems, or she's mistaking me for someone else." She turned to Mark with flashing eyes. "What kind of game is this? Bringing this stranger into our home to make absurd accusations?" Mark remained calm, his professional face impenetrable. "No one is playing games, Helena. We're just seeking the truth." A small circle of guests began to form around them, drawn by the raised tone of the conversation. Rose noticed some were already whispering, watching the scene with poorly disguised curiosity. "Richard," Helena said, grabbing her husband's arm, "this woman is clearly disturbed. Ask security to escort her out." Richard seemed completely disoriented by the situation. "Helena, I'm sure there's some misunderstanding." "There is no misunderstanding," Rose interjected, stepping forward. "It was time to present the evidence." "Mr. Sterling, there's something you need to see." She pulled the envelope from her pocket, containing copies of the documents she had found in Helena's room, the custody transfer forms, the insurance policy. "What is this?" Richard asked, hesitantly accepting the envelope. "The truth about your wife," Rose replied firmly. Helena tried to snatch the envelope, but Richard had already opened it, his eyes quickly scanning the documents. His expression shifted from confusion to shock, then to a rising anger. "What the hell is this, Helena? An insurance policy in my name that I never authorized. Custody documents for Leo partially signed?" He raised his eyes, staring at her in disbelief. "My signature. Did you forge my signature?" "Richard, I can explain," Helena began, her voice suddenly sweet, conciliatory. They're just precautions to protect our family if something happens. You're always so busy. I was just trying to take care of these details to spare you. Just like you took care of the details for your previous husbands, Clara asked, her voice cutting. Like you took care of my brother before he had that mysterious accident. Like you took care of my nephew before he disappeared. A murmur ran through the small crowd that now surrounded them. Helena's mask was visibly crumbling piece by piece as she glanced frantically around like a cornered animal. "This is absurd," she hissed, trying to maintain her composure. "A conspiracy to defame me. Richard, don't you see what they're doing? They're trying to tear us apart." Richard shook the documents in his hand. "And this? How do you explain this? Rose must have planted it," Helena accused, her control slipping even further. "She's always been obsessively attached to you and Leo. She probably forged everything to frame me." Mark stepped forward, pulling another envelope from the inner pocket of his jacket. "The full report from the private investigator I hired, Richard. Photos, dates, witness statements. 3 prior identities. 3 wealthy men who suffered mysterious tragedies after marrying her. 2 children sent to distant boarding schools, who lost contact with their families. 1 boy who disappeared completely. Lies!" Helena screamed, completely abandoning her elegant facade. "All lies!" "And this?" Rose pulled the small recorder from her pocket, pressing the play button. Leo's voice filled the tense silence. "She took me down the dark hallway to the portrait of Mum. She said there was a secret behind it. When I went in, it was very dark. I asked where the present was, and she said, 'This is the surprise,' and closed the door. I heard her laughing softly on the other side. And then silence." Helena lunged forward, trying to grab the recorder, but Richard seized her by the arm, his face contorted with the fury and pain of betrayal. "You locked my son in a secret passage. That's why he disappeared during the party." His voice trembled, understanding finally dawning. "What else have you done, Helena? What were you planning to do at the estate?" The silence that followed was deafening. Helena looked around, seeing the horrified stares, the whispers, the phones discreetly recording. Her carefully constructed reputation was collapsing before her eyes. "It was her," Helena whispered, pointing a trembling finger at Rose. "She wants to take my place. She always has. Ask anyone, she's obsessed with you and Leo." But the desperation in her voice, the raw hatred in her eyes betrayed her words. Richard took a step back, the horror plain on his face as he finally saw the true face of the woman he had brought into his home, near his son. "Security," he called, his voice now firm despite the shock. "Escort my wife to the study and keep her there until the police arrive." "The police?" Helena repeated, complete panic finally breaking through her facade. "You can't do this. I'm your wife. Everything I did was for us, for our family." As the security guards approached, Helena seemed to understand that her game was over. In a final desperate act, she threw herself toward Rose. You ruined everything." Mark and Richard acted simultaneously, restraining her before she could reach Rose. As the guards led her away, her screams echoed through the hall that was once filled with music and elegant conversation, now silenced by collective shock. The guests stared, stunned by the scene. Rose, exhausted by the confrontation, leaned against a nearby column for support. Mark immediately came to her side. "Are you all right?" She nodded, still processing what had just happened. "Leo," she said finally. "I need to check if Leo is safe." Richard, who was giving instructions to one of the guards, turned at the sound of his son's name. "I'm coming with you," he said, his face still pale with shock. "I need to see my son." As they climbed the stairs, leaving the growing buzz of the interrupted party behind them, Richard briefly took Rose's arm. "I should have seen it," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "I should have seen the signs." "She was very skilled," Rose replied softly. "An experienced manipulator. But you saw," he observed. "You always saw through her." Rose didn't answer. It wasn't a time for recriminations or blame, but for rebuilding. Helena would be investigated, possibly arrested. Her past crimes would come to light, bringing some measure of justice to Clara and other victims. But the most important thing now was Leo, protecting him, reassuring him, helping him rebuild a sense of security. When they reached his bedroom door, Richard hesitated, his hand on the knob. "Will he forgive me?" he asked in a low voice. "For not listening to him? For leaving him vulnerable? Rose looked at the man she had known for so many years, now broken by guilt but finally free from the manipulation that had blinded him. "He's your son," she replied simply. "His love for you never wavered, even in the hardest moments." Richard nodded, taking a deep breath before knocking on the door. "Leo? Son, it's us. Everything's okay now." From the other side, they heard the sound of a key turning. The door opened, revealing Olivia's anxious face, and behind her, Leo, small, cautious, but with a glimmer of hope in his eyes. "Dad?" he asked hesitantly. Helena is gone," Richard replied, kneeling to be at his son's eye level, "and she's never coming back. I promise." For a long moment, father and son just looked at each other, years of unspoken fears, of doubts and uncertainties hanging between them. Then, with a choked sob, Leo threw himself into his father's arms, who held him tightly, as if afraid he might disappear if he let go. Rose stepped back discreetly, giving them the space they needed for this moment of reconnection. Olivia did the same, following her into the hallway. "Is it really over?" the cook asked in a low voice. Rose watched Richard and Leo embrace. The barriers Helena had erected finally crumbled. "Yes," she replied, feeling relief wash over her exhausted body. "It's over." Downstairs, the last of the guests were leaving the mansion, taking with them the scandal that would surely be the talk of social circles for weeks. The police would arrive soon to take statements and collect evidence. There would be investigations, interrogations, perhaps even trials. But in that moment, in the emotional embrace between father and son, Rose saw what truly mattered, the chance for a new beginning, the possibility of healing the invisible wounds Helena had inflicted. "The promise of better days ahead. What now?" Olivia whispered. Rose watched the scene for another moment before replying, "Now we rebuild, one day at a time." End of story. Dear listeners, we hope the story of Rose and the Sterling family has deeply touched your hearts. To continue this emotional journey, we've prepared a special playlist with equally captivating stories. You can find it here by clicking the link to your left. If you enjoyed this narrative about courage, protection, and new beginnings, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and leave a like on the video. Every day we bring you unique stories that explore the complexity of human relationships. Don't miss our upcoming content. We look forward to your comments.